Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Alma. Welcome, Fabi. Welcome, attendees, to the panel discussion for today. While we are waiting for more people to join, I was thinking we could just begin the conversation itself. The topic of today's discussion is, around how employee engagement has changed after COVID, especially in the Philippines, and how companies need to evolve and how they have evolved over time. The idea of the entire session is to identify the evolution of employee recognition, engagement, and what are the measures we as the HR community can take to make employee lives easier and make them more connected to their organizations. So without further ado, let me quickly welcome the two lovely ladies on the panel. So we have Alma Revillo, she's from Concentrix, and we have Fabi Carino from Dentsu International. Welcome, Alma. Welcome, Fabi, and to this panel discussion. Thank you so much for joining with us today. I would just quickly, leave the floor to you to give a quick introduction about yourselves and your companies to the panelists, and then we can start. So I'll start alphabetically. Over to you, Alma. If you could quickly introduce yourself and, Concentrix as the company and the landscape.
Hey, all right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Alma Revilla. Thanks, Mitty. I'm currently employed with Concentrix Philippines as a site director and program delivery director. I actually joined the company in 2004 as a team leader and moved my way up into the ops director role about 4 or 5 years ago, and then to the site director role a couple of years back. And my overall responsibility is to the delivery or the execution of the client, shareholder, and employee value metrics. And that's really overseeing multiple sites across the Philippines, and also multiple clients in various channels. And Concentrix is one of the actually it is the largest private employer in the Philippines with close to about 100,000 employees. And as of today, we have about 60% of our employees working on a brick and mortar setup. So we're actually on a hybrid model. So about 60% are working on site, and the remaining 40% are all working at the convenience of their own homes, which we've also provided the means to be able to do that. Everything logistically has been provided, including the internet service provider, because that's something that's also critical, especially in the work that we do in the business processing and outsourcing. So that's a short snapshot of who I am and the company that I work with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alma. And over to you, Fabi, if you could quickly introduce yourself and Dentsu International, the company, the landscape for the panelists and the attendees.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Smithy, for inviting me in this prestigious event. You know, I'm really excited to be always part of this kind of events, to talk about and share my experience as an HR practitioner. So I'm the country HR director of Dentsu International Philippines. Dentsu is an advertising and communication specialist firm. We are responsible for a lot of big commercials that you watch on TV, but more on digital, because I don't think anyone watches TV nowadays, but a lot of people are on YouTube, Netflix, and I myself is using my own TV box where I have access to a lot of channels. And of course, prior to that, I've been working in different industries. I've been part of Thomson Reuters, part of Sykes, also as a learning and development director. That's really my specialty and my blood. It's really in learning and development. I also been working with pharmaceutical industries, where I headed the learning and development, including ABS-CBN University, call that ABS University. So right now, as the country HR director of Densu for the last 3.5 years, I have been responsible from end to end. And of course, this pandemic has really pushed us to think creatively on how we will be able to take care of our people. After all, our number one resource is our people. We get results through our people. As HR, I guess when I do my talks with HR practitioners, they always say and agree with me that 2020 was the most challenging year for all of us in terms of how to manage people to become productive, to be motivated, to have that mental wellness, agility, grit, and resiliency. And so I have specialized also in mental wellness as my part of my passion project. I started a project called Mind Your Mind even before the pandemic, and I have been continuously conducting these programs not only for my company but for other organizations for pro bono, just so to give back to the community.
That's great. Thank you so much, Fabi, for that. And yeah, I'll come back to the mental wellness piece as well during the panel discussion too. Now, we also have our third panelist who's joined us. Hi, Mildred. Welcome. So if you could quickly just give an introduction about yourself and Orica as a company.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. So thank you so much for inviting me here as well, Sweetie, to be part of the panel. It's a great pleasure, and it's always, of course, a good thing to share best practices and know and learn as much as well from other companies' best practices, and hopefully be able to actually apply those into our company as well. Orica is one of the best or the world's leading mining and infrastructure solutions provider from the production and supply of commercial explosives. Yes, our commercial explosives supplier and manufacturer. We support blasting systems. We also have blasting systems, mining chemicals, and geotechnical monitoring to our cutting edge digital solution and comprehensive range of services. We sustainably mobilize the Earth's resources. So everything that is being used right now for our technology, your very expensive mobile phones, your electric cars, hybrid cars and things like that, everything, all of that are actually being supported by Orica as, the main provider of the blasting solutions or commercial explosives. We also support demolitions and civil and infrastructure, and of course tunneling businesses all over the world. Orica is a niche. We support the niche market, and we are actually present in 180 countries. I'm the head for HR business partnering for both our GBS and Asia region. And as the business partner, I actually look after the strategic part of HR. I work with a lot of our experts in the Center of Excellence, and that's it. That's with having not really overseeing it. They do not report to me, but I actually partner with our talent acquisition specialists, with our HR advisors who does the nitty gritty in people services, and of course we have our performance and rewards team and organizational development team who actually looks after the entire, the other spectrum of HR. I make sure, that I actually support the strategy and the goals and objectives of the business that I support, or these are my stakeholders under my portfolio. So that's what I do in Orica. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Mildred, for sharing that. So yeah, now that we also have enough attendees who've joined in, we can get to the meatier stuff. Starting off with Alma, let's talk about employee engagement post-COVID. Concentrix is a huge organization with more than, I think, 300,000 employees across the world. I think around about 100,000 just in the Philippines itself. So with such a large workforce, engaging them remotely converting them to a work from home setup overnight would have been a really big challenge. So I'd love to understand, how did Concentrix approach the employee engagement as a problem remotely once the pandemic hit?
Right. Thanks, Smithy. Like any other, like the rest of the brick and mortar companies, right? I think no one was actually ready when we went through the entire global pandemic early last year. And so, like all the other companies, Mildred and Fabi, right, in terms of how we had to work really fast in building an operational governance that would allow us to transition into the hybrid work setup. This actually entailed Concentrix, our company, to be very proactive in terms of stepping up our engagement efforts as our global operating model, which we have become an expert on into Mildred. We've built a center of excellence on that as well. So we were very limited to having everyone work on site, and the governance was all around that, right? Not just the operational governance, but even from a hiring perspective, the talent acquisition, the training, the people solutions, WFM or workforce, everything has been built around the center of excellence of a brick and mortar setup. So we really had to step up. We had to ensure that we came up with a new engagement model that is more than just the perks. And having remote happy hours to keep our work at home employees engaged, it actually requires a further strategic approach and a long-term commitment to our teams. And so as we evolved into that, one of the key things that we had to innovate first is how to be able to connect and digitize engagement without compromising client information. As you know, in the business and process outsourcing work, we take pride in ensuring that we secure private identifiable information, or PIIs, from our clients, which now, from a work at home setup or in the hybrid model, our employees have an easy access to. So that was one of the key things that we had to really innovate in terms of how do we digitize the engagement. And with that, because of the strength of the company, we were able to actually build an in-house tool. We call it CNX One app, which actually allows us to connect with our employees, not just in the Philippines, but globally. And it serves as a one-stop shop for like company updates, IT services, workforce, staffing, employer relations. And at the same time, it also serves as our social media platform for employees to engage with each other. So this was actually a great way for everyone, especially our work at home employees, to connect. And plus, it also is accessible in any mobile devices. So that was one of the key things that we had to ensure that we actually innovate and build immediately for our group. Now, as we further enhance the engagement piece, we wanted to continue the same rigor and the same initiatives that we had on the brick and mortar setup. So for example, fun days, food days, recognition and awarding, and other milestones. But one of the challenges that we saw is that how do we go ahead and send food, tokens, kits, and trinkets to our work at home employees real time? Because when everyone's working on site, right, we had to procure, we had to prepare for the event, right? And we can actually hand it over to the awardees, for example, depending on what the event we have. But now in the work at home setup, the limitation there is how do we get there on time? Plus the cost. There's also the cost involvement, right? And so that's when we partnered with Advantage Club to leverage how we're driving rewards digitally. So that was actually one of the key projects that we launched, and we got a lot of insights from basing on the employee satisfaction survey. Of course, we run that annually and internally. For some of the geos, we also do it twice a year. And so that really was a result of the employee survey. And at the same time, also from the executives in terms of how we are strategically innovating to ensure that we reach our employees as real time as possible when it comes to recognition. And so as a company, what we did to ensure that we're able to transition into this hybrid model is really think of a lot of ways to make sure that there's an increased reach to for employees in that we create a setup with a sense of belongingness regardless of where you are. And of course, the ease of coming into work for those that are working on site, we had to, on top of the digital platform, right, we also had to take care of those that are coming on site and make sure that they're safe. And we've actually, I'm not sure if you guys have seen in the Philippines, we have concentric buses that goes from north to south, south to north. We also have those in the other areas because we have also footprint in Cebu, Iloilo, Bacolod, Davao, Cagayan de Oro. And so those are all available in any parts of the Philippines. And at some point during the first few months of the pandemic, sometime between March up until June or July, we also had to take care of our employees by making sure that if they're really unable to work, regardless of and they're not able to take advantage of what we have offered, transportation, hotel, lodging, and even the work at home setup, because there are limitations also for those that are working from home or those who cannot come to the office. We even paid them to the extent just to make sure that they're able to bring food to the table, right? And that's, you know, how fanatical we are with our employees. So that's how the entire transition that Concentrix did in terms of transforming our governance, right? Not just limited to engagement, but the overall process as we are now on the hybrid setup. That's it, Smithy.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Alma. And I really like the fact that, you know, when employees were not able to come to office, I think for 4 months, Concentrix was still paying them, even though they were not doing anything. So I think that's really nice. And it shows that you take care of your employees and also gives them a sense of belonging to the organization.
Correct. And even up until now, we actually pay our employees for those that are unable to work, right? Because they are either on self-quarantine, whether they are COVID positive or not as part of the contact trace. We also actually pay our employees a maximum of 10 days just to make sure that they get better, they stay at home, and they don't compromise the health and safety of their family and everyone else.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Over to you, Fabi. I know Dentsu is really big on mental wellness as well. And when the pandemic hit, I think that was one of the major challenges which people were facing, because we're social animals. We're not used to, you know, being cooped up inside the house. And with everyone in the house, people were fighting, and it was very, it was a bad time. Plus, there was so much of bereavement happening, you know, so many bad things were going on. So how did Dentsu approach the employee engagement as a problem during the pandemic, if you could share that?
Yeah, so everyone was caught by surprise on how that pandemic lasted. We just thought, right, that it will just last for 1 month, and then later an announcement became 3 months, and now we're still at it. We're not yet done. But I would say there were a lot of developments over time. I'd like to look at the glass half full rather than half empty. I think that we are blessed that we are alive and healthy as we speak right now. And that's one thing that I really wanted to impart to everyone, that despite this pandemic, we have to be grateful for what we have. We have to be grateful that we are surviving, we are thriving again, we are getting back into shape and getting back into business. During the time that we started it, we really had a hard time in terms of our numbers. So honestly speaking, we had to even let go of some people in our organization. And as an HR director, it was my job to ensure that we let go of our people, not people, but positions that were no longer relevant for this year's plan. And I think that has to be practical for any business to survive, to thrive, and to be able to cope with the demands. So what we did in terms of making sure that we have some mental wellness programs, we started off by having surveys. It's so essential that if you want to change something, you need to measure the baseline of how people feel, because we cannot assume that everyone is okay or everyone is feeling this way, because we are working remotely and our world is so narrow that we can only feel and see on what we feel. So it's so essential that we put a wellness and culture survey that is a way for us to determine what interventions would be necessary for us to take. Since I had a mental wellness program prior to the pandemic, I had to reinforce it and continue to run uh, programs that involve about training our people about mental health, about mental wellness. I also engage with an AI technology for them to check on a daily basis on Viber, and they can chat with my AI called Amara, and they would chat with me and say, okay, how is your day? Things like that. Because I couldn't multiply myself, I only had a few people in HR. And as you know, HR is the go-to of everyone aside from the leaders. So those were the things that we had. And then, of course, I had to empower our leaders to make sure that they know how to take care first of themselves before other people, because it's so essential that you have to give from you cannot give from an empty vessel. So leaders really needed to have that essential role in ensuring that they are checking on their people, making sure that they touch base on Viber, they leverage on technology, on Teams, but sometimes to an extent that it becomes so fatigued that every time we're all talking that way. And by human nature, we are social beings that we want human touch, we want to be in front of people, but we had to cope with our current scenario. We also made sure in terms of our mental wellness that I partnered with experts, because even if my background as a psychologist, I cannot be able to cater to 400 people. So it's so essential that if you are in HR, if you're a business leader, you cannot do it by yourself. You have to partner with vendors who would be able to help you in your engagement. Like for example, Advantage Club, you can also have other companies that does mental health and does mental health counseling, because we are not all experts in our field. We have to focus on certain things that are more essential, and we need leave it to the experts on how we can reward our employees, engage our employees, and then use that data, because there's no one size fits all. It has to be tailor fit to what the needs of the organization is. My needs will be different from a BPO, will be different from a corporate setup, because my needs will be something that is unique, and that is what will set it apart when it comes to creating a mental wellness program.
Thanks, Peggy, for sharing that. And you touched upon a very important point that leaders need to walk the talk, right? I mean, if they are, if they're the ones who are driving engagement, the company culture will automatically get improved. So it's really imperative for them to be more involved. And it's not just an HR department's job to drive employee engagement. It has to be done via the leadership of different departments as well. So moving on to Mildred, with Orica, it was also, interesting in the sense that you still have frontliners, and you could not just have them work from home during the pandemic, and that creates another set of challenges in itself. So I'd love to hear about, how did you approach employee engagement as a problem, especially if you have such a diversified workforce across so many countries. How did overall Orica International approach this as a challenge?
Yeah, I think, just like Alma and Tavi, Orica actually doesn't, really also know how to navigate this. It's really very new, I guess, to everyone. 2020 is the year everything changed and life hasn't been the same since then. While coronavirus turned our life upside down, it did bring us about some changes that we now address as part of our now normal. Before it's called new normal, but I think now it's called now normal, right? So it's like it's just part of everything that we do now. And the thought to ponder upon then is, will we ever go back to our old lives? And I guess we all know the answer now. no, not again, especially in the workplace. As you know, Orica is very collegiate with regards to reporting. Everyone, has to report, to the premises, to the office premises. But obviously, during the pandemic, we just have to transition everyone into work from home in 3 days' time. All of our, not everyone is actually issued laptops as tool of trade. So we're also very traditional with regards to our tool of trade, our equipment in the office, where people are still looking at their two large desktops while doing their work, because most of them most of our population in GBS are actually accountants, and that they would really need to look at two monitors when they're doing their Excel sheets. So it was very difficult for us, but I didn't also imagine that we can make it in 3 days' time to transition everyone to be working from home 100%. And we have never returned. We have never actually attempted to return to the office even until now. And, and I think this is something as well that everyone has valued or felt valued about in Orica. We as a company, we actually have 5 core values. And because we are obviously a blasting company, safety first, that's our first and foremost priority. And it doesn't just apply, now we all know that it doesn't just apply to, the blasting sites or the mining sites or where, wherever our explosives are being used, but it also applies to the health and safety of our team members. So we have been very, very true to that priority as a company by not letting anyone report for work. And we have actually managed, we've actually come up with a lot of productivity monitoring tools, time and attendance tools, that were not actually present before. So that's how agile we were as well as a company to support and to actually adapt, to what is needed, or needed from us by our team members. I think as well that the pandemic forced us to be socially distanced, but couldn't make us socially distant. People, are social animals. Human beings. That's our nature, and people would normally have, need to have that sense of belongingness. Especially that, as I said, we are not so used to not being in the office, and everything is actually being done face to face pre-pandemic time. In the last year and a half, the online space has seen, a lot, even strangers reaching out, and in Orica, even cross-functionally, we have been reaching out to each other just to make sure, that we are okay. We are an Australian company, and the Are You Okay Day in Australia is really very big. So the Are You Okay tagline, has been a very big influence in Orica since pandemic began. We make sure that we reach out to each other. We make sure that we look after each other. And, if people are actually really very shy, especially culturally, we are not so open, to talking about our mental health issues, our mental health concern. Where are we with regards to that? We also have our EAP, or our Employee Assistance Program, where people could actually reach out confidentially to our external counselors, and get, counseling and advice. A professional advice with regards to their mental health. So I think, we are coming out of it together, as we have come into it together as well. So people didn't really felt left behind. With regards to engagement, I believe that, we had a different strategy. We weren't, I didn't actually intentionally partnered with a lot of external vendors, for that matter. But instead, what we did was actually to empower and more our ERG, or our employee resource groups. right? So we have three employee resource groups in Orica. So we have one that we call fundamentalists. So they are our employee engagement team. They are obviously composed of our team members or our employees who have this passion to make everyone engage. They are the think tanks. They are our think tanks of all of the employee engagement activities and initiatives. And HR, they work under the umbrella of HR. I provide them their budget. Their budget is under my cost center, but I let them think. I let them think. And during this pandemic season, you wouldn't believe how creative people, how pandemic could actually release or unleash the creativity in people. And I couldn't believe how creative they were. So they actually put a lot of gamification strategy into what we have been doing previously, face to face, and now we can only do it virtually. But it wasn't easy. For 4 or 5 months, we actually, most of the activities, engagement activities were put into halt simply because we're trying to navigate things, right? So it's like, we're not trained to do this. How are we going to, to involve everyone? How are we going to engage everyone? How can we make sure that they like what we will be doing or offering to them? And so, because it helped, that most of our population are millennials and zennials, and they are the think tank of our employee engagement team. So they actually put gamification, into everything, that we have done in 2020. It's for some people who haven't heard yet of gamification. It's actually a strategy attempting to enhance services or organization and activities in order to create a similar experience to those experience when you're playing a game, right? So it's a good thing, it's a good thing that we have a lot of techie, millennials and zennials, in the house, right? So they really help me so much, when we brainstorm on that. And part of those initiatives that I'm really proud of is the Virtual Olympics, so it's a virtual Olympics, that we normally just imagine of doing physically, face to face, but we were able to actually do it virtually with 98% participation rate, including SLP from offshore. Yeah, so, and they enjoyed it. And, and this is, the think tank of this is our Manila team members, and they actually migrated, or how should I say, imported, what we did in Manila, in GBS, into the rest of the regions in Orica. So that's something that I'm proud about. We were also able to do Family Day virtually, believe it or not, with participation of the whole family, including pets. So yeah, so it was really a very fun thing, to do. So that's something that we did. And there's another employee resource group that I got involved, that I really made sure to be involved in, in engagement. In a sense, I still call this engagement, and they are our Orica advocates. And Orica advocates actually look after, they are our CSR arms. These are the people or the ERG that we use for CSR. So they are also the ones who thinks about how we can help the community, how we can get involved even during the pandemic. So we have this, lunch for our frontliners. We also got involved with community pantries, things like that. And they thought, I actually involved them with the mental health awareness and foundation series that we have had as part of our advocacy for mental health. We've actually started a long time back. I believe that was in 2018 when we started the campaign for mental health awareness. And we have, we just have to think of a strategy on how to continue and build on that foundation that we have started already. So they got involved with it. And it's a good thing as well that we are a GICC member. So it's an organization of Australian and ANZ company, and most of the members are actually shared services, IT and BPO companies. So we are able to also reach out to them and capitalize on their program into our program.
Great, great. Thanks so much, Mildred, for sharing that. And I especially love the virtual Olympics and the virtual family day concept. I think it's also interesting and I think required to involve family members of employees in such events so that they also feel part of the community and the organization. So before I move on to the next question, there is a question on chat, which any of you please feel free to answer. So Christine has asked a question that we are an SME company and we are considering to have a hybrid setup, maybe Q1 of 2022. How do you select who will be in the office and what are the expected changes that we should consider if we do such a setup? If any of you could answer that question, please.
I can take it up, Smithy, because this is a very critical one for us, right? With 60-40 split in terms of our hybrid model. So of course, from a people solutions or HR standpoint, we have to make sure that we consider first the health. So we actually initiated the survey to ensure that we understand if there's any individual with comorbidity, with health risks. Pregnant individuals, pregnant women, elderly, those that may be at risk, right, if they are going to be traveling. So that's the first key. So really the key is to be able to come up with a survey to ensure that we're capturing that. Second is, of course, their ability to work from home. As not all have actually a setup where they have a space for them to be able to really work productively, right? There's such a case where they're probably in an area where they don't have a good internet service provider, right, or connection. And so that's one of the considerations as well. So from our company, we did another survey to ensure. So obviously we gamified that to ensure that we're able to test it and really use the corresponding IP, test, etc. That's second. Third is also the willingness. There are also, and I'll share this from experience because we've had employees where on the assessment, right, on the survey, we're able to assess that they can work from home. But at some point, from a wellness, mental wellness standpoint, it's also not helping them. Where this might sound funny, but we've also had instances where employees are saying that in order for me to protect my relationship with my family, I'll have to work on site because it's just causing a lot of stress. Working from home, right? People are not used to be spending 24/7 with each other. And they probably got used to working, at the office like 12 hours with travel time and even probably more than that. And now that we have, they've started to work from home, there's just a lot of stuff happening, kids running around, somebody's knocking and all of it. And so those are also one of the considerations. But I think the most important one is to really take note of their ability from a health standpoint. It's very important for safety, right, of everyone. And then second is, of course, the ability to be able to service or work from home basing on technology, the availability of technology.
Thanks so much for that, Alma. And Fabi and Mildred, if you'd like to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in into that, no? Because we're also moving into what we call agile working environment in my organization, and I'm pretty active in actually stabilizing first the plans because it's really a big leap. Imagine we had 7 offices, and right now we cut it down into just 2 floors. So the working environment will really tremendously change where we're now scheduling people to come to work through approvals. So things that I need to consider and you might want to consider for those ones who are interested to do a hybrid thing. First and foremost, you have to leverage on technology, making sure that your technology will be able to support your work. And secondly, it will have to have a workforce status where you could schedule people coming to work. So we're using a global reservation form where people can schedule when they will be at work. So for example, we have 400 people and we cannot accommodate 400 people in our office. There will be certain instances that they will have to come to work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but they will need to be using our global technology. And I would say you don't have to be using a global technology. Maybe for a start, you could use your Excel for that matter if you don't have budget yet, because it really entails budget and there are a lot of workforce technology that are so expensive, and you could work on that first. Another thing that you need to consider is the policies and procedures. You cannot just think of, okay, everybody hybrid, etc. You need to be very clear as to what would be the roles of every individual, what would be the hours that's required. Simple as clean as you go mentality, that everything is shared, so people have to leave the office without leaving personal belongings and keeping their lockers secured. So these are simple matters, but these are my pain points at the moment that we are working on this, because 2022 is around the corner in 2 months' time, and we are fixing our two small offices where we will have to fit everything. Another thing that I had considered is that all your offices need not to be designed on cubicles anymore. You have to consider huddle rooms, rooms for interview, common areas where people can eat, and an area where people can lounge. And I've done this through a lot of research. So it's not just a matter of having just an office and that's it. You have to consider that we are all social beings, as we have always stressed from all speakers. So there must be a way for you to have huddle room scale, or you can convert let's say, a small room into a bigger room. We have to be creative at that, and that's what we're doing. Like we could have a conference room, and then later on you can make this as a hybrid area for you to become a interview room, or as big as a conference room that can at least accommodate 10 people. So those three areas: technology, and likewise your policies, procedures, and likewise you need to take a look at the logistics and office space, because it's not that simple that you just have an office. You have to understand the psyche of people as to in terms of privacy, including the noise reduction, because you cannot be working when people are all working around you. So these are the top three things that I could share that I'm currently actually working on also for my hybrid working environment for Denso for next year.
Thank you so much, Fabi. That was very helpful. There's also an add-on question by Norbine. I hope I'm spelling it right. Apologies if I'm not. In line with the hybrid, do the companies pay for Wi-Fi? Do you allow work from home from the province? And how do you monitor productivity? Anyone of you could answer that.
I can take it up. Actually, for all three, it's a yes for us. Well, Wi-Fi connectivity allowance is something that we provide. We understand that there are certain households whom they won't be able to get one because they're probably new there, etc. So the company actually helped them. We partnered with the ISPs to ensure that we vouch for our employees, and we actually signed up for them. So that was one of the key things that we had to do first. Second is in terms of allowing people, I think it's allowing people to work from the provinces, right? In terms of that piece, because security is one of the key things that you'll have to also include in the infrastructure, right? Especially in our setup, or maybe even in other companies, right? Banks, or actually mostly everyone, because there are certain client information or company information that you really have to protect. And so our policy, we've built a policy in terms of ensuring that all the IP address that's registered, we've invested on a tool to ensure that that's assessed, right, and monitored. Now, if they go outside of that, there is an approval process so that we can enroll the IP address of the province or the area that you'll be moving into. And our infrastructure actually allows us to detect if you're working from the registered IP address or not. So that's one key, but that's something that the company can set up from the get-go. And I think I would just like to add, right? One of the key things that we look into in the hybrid model, too, especially from the work from home, is to ensure that we have a BCP. In the Philippines, we all know about this. We have power outages, we have internet service providers that are down, right? Maintenance, etc. So it's really key to make sure that we think of how do you come up with a BCP? Because like for us, 40%, that's about close to 40,000 individuals, right? If a certain area is down, that's a big impact in the overall productivity. And so one of the key things to ensure that we have a continuous work productivity is to ensure that you have a BCP. So I don't know, I know Fabi mentioned about an office setup as well, right? But for us, because we're such a huge institution, we've actually come up with what we call as a community hub. So if, for example, you're working in the province, right, and you used to be assigned in, let's say, a Quezon City site, but you're now working in, let's say, Clark or in Bulacan, right? And it would be hard for you to go ahead and commute to work. And so if you don't have internet connection or there's a power outage, what we actually do is we've built a community hub. It's actually like our typical offices, closer to certain areas where we have identified from a people solution standpoint where the majority of our work from home force is. And so we have one in North, we have one in South, that's in Cavite and Bulacan. So any of the individuals who would have power interruptions or outages, they can actually temporarily, like what Fabi has mentioned, book a reservation so that they can go to that particular hub and work from there temporarily. So BCP is also important, and that's why we've built that for our company as well.
Thanks, Alma. The next question is it a good thing to have mental health seminar every month?
I probably can take that. Okay. I think primarily yes, because it gives an opportunity for people to understand themselves better. I think that it's so essential that it needs to be planned out. It's not just for the sake of having mental health and say, okay, we'll have a mental health every month. It doesn't have to be that way. It has to be well thought of. First and foremost, I mentioned a while ago, measure the temperature of your people. Do not assume that you think that they're all anxious. Do not assume that they need happiness programs, but rather understand what are their top 3 requirements and then schedule those programs and get experts to do that. It is so essential that your scheduling will have to be also supported by your leaders. I have experienced a time that had such great programs. I was so excited about it. But if you don't have the support from your leaders, you will just end up having 10% of your candidates or 10% of your employees attending to it. So it needs to be well thought of. It has to have a basis of a training needs analysis before running a program. Number 3, it has to be well supported from top level until your managers. They have to walk the talk. They have to be the ones saying, you have to attend the program of Fabi because this will be helpful for you, and not just because you think that it'll be run. Another thing that you need to add is that you need to measure its effectivity. First, its attendance. Second, did it make an impact? If it's not working out well, what can you improve moving forward? Because what you measure can change how you will run the cadence of your program. And I've learned this the hard way. I just thought I will just run it, but I realized there's so many intricacies that you need to consider. That doesn't cost so much because these ones will help you work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, and I think I want to build on that, Smithy, as well. It doesn't have to be a webinar. There are a lot of initiatives and programs that could actually be part of the mental health wellness of our employees. So I think depending on the population, gamification, things like that could actually, and even just a 1 hour get together, at the end of the day could actually be part of your mental health program. So I think, there are a lot of things, not just webinar. If you really want to be very creative and be engaged, or allow your employees to be engaged as well.
Yeah, just one item, Smitty, that I'd like to add, because this is also very important, right? When we talk about mental wellness, it's more so needed now, especially in this setup, because like in our teams, for example, one teammate might have passed away because of COVID, right? And how do you care for that? How do you care for the mental well-being of the teammates who've been with that person, for working with that person closely for quite some time, right? And that's why it is really important that it becomes a program where you really follow a structure, to what Fabi just mentioned, right? It's not just merely because it's a tick in a box that, I have this project, I have this mental wellness, and that's it. I think it's important that we have to make sure that from a channel perspective, it is accessible. Second, is it also able to cater to a person, customized to person, right? So getting the help of professionals, commissioning or partnering with mental wellness partners is key. And third is that there are instances where you may have like discussions or sessions, but some individuals would actually prefer to have one-on-one. So those things have to be considered. And to what Mildred just mentioned, right? It's not just limited to a webinar. It can be personalized. And most importantly, we have to tap the professionals. Even our people solutions team, even if they're psych graduates and etc., sometimes there are really trends, especially in the new normal, that we have to consider. And that's why tapping into the experts would be important.
Thank you, all three of you. And these questions are really interesting. I'm thinking of just spending the rest of the time on these questions. There are two questions which are very similar, so I'll combine them. One is by KitKat. She's asking, do you provide testing for those who report to on-site work? And then there's a question by Raquel asking, may I ask your plans for those personnel who really opt not to be vaccinated? So I think both are like similar questions. Anyone of you could answer those.
Yeah, Smithy, when they say testing, this is COVID swab testing. Yeah, right. Okay. Now that we're actually planning to go back to the office in 2022, part of our stocks are going to be the antigen. Yeah, so we are actually going to stock up on that, and right now we're actually planning to to bring people. We're also planning for a hybrid workforce team, and we're planning to bring people on face by face. We will be starting at 10% of our population, but even those 10% of our population are going to be rostered. So 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So that's how we're going to plan that out, so that if one of them tested positive, then everyone gets to be a close contact already, right? Then we actually have 14 days, as the normal quarantining days for them to get themselves quarantined, and then the other half of that 10% would actually report to office after obviously sanitizing the whole premises. So yes, we're going to be budgeting for testing. Yeah, and for those people who doesn't want to be vaccinated, it's their personal choice. But as as an organization, we are also very clear that that's their personal choice. But that's not going to affect the operations of the company. That's not supposed to hinder the operations of the company. So if their role is a critical role and it has been chosen to actually report in the office, then that's their prerogative. It's not going to affect or help alter the decision of the company to that role report in the premises.
Thank you, Mildred, for that. The next question, we have two questions by Norbine. First is, what government or labor policies do we need to watch out for in designing hybrid work? Just wondering if you have seen one that may be subject to misinterpretation. And the second one is, some employees say they are tired of responding to surveys. So how do you make surveys fun? So that's
Why
a
not use Menti?
I'm
Why not use menti.com? We
Yeah.
actually, on our GA, we actually have a general assembly, and we, if we want to do survey, it's a very, very subtle way of actually doing your survey. So use menti.com, how should I say, put your questions, in a way that it doesn't actually look like a questionnaire or
True.
you're surveying for something, right? So this is where where everything becomes creative. But for us, we actually make use of menti.com as as part of our employee survey, and that's very normal. Not a lot of people would actually right now respond on survey, right? So what we do is when we have a general assembly, we just inject a subtle employee survey through menti.com. And in Australia, they're actually more on I think this is like splendid.com. So they have another way of doing the survey as well.
I used actually in last time AI technology, so it's like really a virtual assistant. And I devised the question really simple because people don't like answering lengthy questions, but you really need to. So I think that it's not just creating survey for the sake of having a survey. You need to think about what is the best and relevant question, and that it should be just one tick and doesn't have to have open-ended where they have to explain so many things. It has to be simple, direct, and measurable because that's your only way for you to measure. So for example, if a question is, how are you, 1 to 10? That in a way is so powerful, simple, but you would actually understand how your people are. And that is actually the proposed W Health guidelines where if you want to understand people well, you can just ask that question 1 to 10, and you could actually get a lot of insights and how you would be able to get more, interventions. Now, regarding the first question about the Department of Labor when it comes to embracing the gig economy, for me, especially that I work in a workforce where we embrace project employees, we embrace, gigs where people can work with us for 1 month, 2 months. We're very cautious about this too. But we have to embrace that the new generation of the X and millennial and the Z generation don't want to really be part of any company for 20 years of their lives. This has totally changed compared to my generation, where we will just stick it out for like 10 years, more so like my parents who stayed with their companies for 30 years. I think people, our companies need to adopt as to what would be the best working environment that is essential with the consideration of, let's say, Department of Labor's benefits that should be given regardless if they're contractual, if they should be given 13 months pay, should be given allowance. More so for us, because we have a lot of, let's say employees who are employed in the creative world where they don't want to be employed full time. We make sure at least an HMO is given to them, especially during this pandemic. So I would say that you can be protected with it, and likewise you are also able to provide a working environment that is apt for the new generation. And in somehow what you need to be careful about is, those things that you're not going to make them forever contractual for the next 5 years. I think that's really wrong. You have to be careful about that. I always make sure that I talk with my legal, and if it's more than a year, more so, then most of our people are really obtained from our company only if they want to. But if they don't want, then that's good because that's coming from them. That's consent. That's based from their consent.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on what Fabi just mentioned, also Smithy, right? I think right now, because the labor code doesn't change, right? So whatever is the benefit that's stipulated in there, you'll have to follow. But I think one key is that we have to be very up to speed or up to date in terms of the AETF direction. So, for example, there are different interpretations on how the LGU would enforce certain policies, right, in the facilities, for example, depending on what type of level of community quarantine we are in. So that's very critical because they actually go around every month. They actually would visit your facility or your site to do their audits. That's together with the LGU and the DOH. So that's very important to make sure that your people solutions team or your HR team, together with your facilities team and the legal team, are in constant communication with the LGU or any of the updates, executive updates that will come in, so that it gets communicated across and aligned in terms of the policies that you have with regards to the IATF guidelines, which is, what is present in the Philippines.
Great. Thank you so much for answering those questions. And with that, we're also on top of the hour. I wish we could have more time and we could spend probably another hour on this. Yeah, until next time, thank you so much, Alma, Fabi, and Mildred, for joining us, for sharing your wisdom and all the wonderful things you have achieved in your organizations in terms of employee engagement. And you're all super women, so it's amazing to have like an all-women panel, very empowering in nature. So thank you, and a big thank you to the attendees as well for coming and joining us today.
Thank you, Smitty, Fabi, and Mildred. I actually learned a lot from both of you. I've actually jotted down notes that I can bring over to my team as well. So thank you so much. And thanks for the questions.
It was great to meet all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Looking forward for more series like this. Thank you so much, Smitty and Advantage Club, for having us today.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you so much, everyone.
Happy Thursday. Bye.
Bye.